Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Let's Talk Retail. This is where we embark on an extraordinary journey through the realms of retail innovation and transformation. I'm your host, Jitendranath Patri, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to a series unlike any other. In this podcast, Let's Talk Retail, we will dive deep into the heart of the retail industry to bring you conversations with true thought leaders. Leadership is a topic of endless discussions and debates. And while it holds a very special place in every industry, what we're going to do today is narrow it down to the ever-changing landscape of the Indian retail industry, where I think unique challenges and opportunities abound. I'm your host, Jitendranath Patri, and let's embark on a quest to unravel the mystery behind exceptional leadership. In our journey to discover what makes a great leader, we are honored to have Mr. Nissan Joseph, the CEO of Metro Brands, share his profound insights with us. In this exclusive conversation, we will delve into his perspective of leadership and the qualities that define an outstanding leader. With the Indian retail industry constantly evolving, we will learn how he navigates this dynamic landscape, leveraging innovation and growth to propel Metro Brands to new heights. So join us on this captivating journey as we unlock the secrets of what it takes to be a successful leader in the retail industry. Good morning, Mr. Joseph, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And may I call you Nissan?
Yes. Good morning, Jiten. And yes, you definitely can call me Nissan.
Leadership. Yeah, much talked about topic, debated, obviously a very integral part of any industry, right? What is your take on leadership?
I think that's quite a broad question. If you look at the number of books that are written on leadership out there, I think it's indicative of how hard it is to nail down leadership. And I think it's because not only is it complex, but there's also many types of leadership. There's situational, there's strategic, there's tactical. All of those require different skill sets, different priorities, and different approaches to it. I think underneath it all, regardless of what you're trying to lead or who you're trying to lead, it starts with you as a leader. It starts with you having an absolute passion for the product, whatever that product is, whether it's a service or a technology that you're selling or you're providing products to the world. You need to be passionate about what you're doing. It doesn't need to be limiting, but you need to be passionate about what is that call that you're trying to make a difference with. Number one. Number two, you got to be really passionate about people, because leadership is not about leading robots. It's not leading computers. It is leading people. And people or leadership takes a lot of passion because it's a lot of work to it. So if you're not passionate about people, highly likely it's not going to be the easiest form to leadership for you. And also, fundamentally, you need to have a strong set of guiding principles. Otherwise, it's very easy to go astray as a leader. There's many, many distractions from the path. And if you don't have a strong set of principles to guide you all along, that can really be something that slows you down in your effectiveness as a leader. So it's a passion for product. It's a passion for people. And of course, it's having a very good set of North Star guiding principles.
Fantastic. So were these the thoughts that kind of help you in your extensive career, both retail, wholesale, what you were doing?
Well, I don't know if it helps me, but three things that I do or think of as a leader is, one is, I call it turn on the lights. The number one, turn on the lights. And turning on the lights is both figurative and it's also literal, right? What I'm trying to say is, if you're turning on the lights in your office, that means you're the first one in the office. And by that, I mean, you got to get in there and set the example. Now, you don't have to physically turn on the lights. You don't have to be the first one in the office. But the point of that comment is you have to set the example as a leader. You cannot expect your people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. So that's number one. But the second part to that turn on the lights is, big part of leadership is inspiring people to do the work that they do. So it's about how do you motivate them? How do you inspire them? And most importantly, turn on the light bulb inside them, both from a creative standpoint, from an innovative standpoint, but absolutely from an inspiration standpoint. So that's the fundamental first rule, I believe, of a leader. Set the example, but also inspire people and turn the lights on in them. The second one I've always said is add a zero. We invented zero, which is really not a number, but it's a great concept. And add a zero simply means think 10x. And when you think 10x, a lot of times you're able to see beyond what is just out there in front of you. I think we all think about incremental growth of 15, 20, 30%. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as a leader, you have to be far ahead of the pack. And if you're not thinking 10x, and working backwards from then. Say, how do we get to 10x and what do we need to be doing? Step one, step two, stage one, stage two, however you want to break down your steps to the 10x goal. So I call the second one add a zero. And the third one is probably something that I find quite elicits some laughter is don't collect wine, drink it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we become alcoholics out there, but what I am suggesting is that you need to learn to celebrate as a leader. There's many successes that you can celebrate, but sometimes we just get so wrapped up in the problems in front of us that we forget to celebrate. And people need that celebration to know that they're working down the journey well. So the third one there is don't collect wine, drink it and celebrate. So the first one is turn on the lights. The second one is add a zero. And the third one is celebrate with the wine.
With the wine. Interesting. I like the way you kind of just beautifully put it together. Yeah. And these are the principles that have kind of guided you all these years.
Exactly. Correct.
Then obviously when it comes to leadership and especially with someone with your experience, right? You've been operating across different cultures, right? How did you manage the dissonance that really comes about?
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate. I had the opportunity to work in 5 different countries with literally 5 different unique and diverse cultures in them. And what I found is, first of all, let's start with a very basic premise. Why I like leadership fundamentally is because it is a win-win game. It's not a zero-sum game. Leadership is about your people winning and you winning. And there's no better game, no more rewarding game than to play a win-win game because everyone's technically headed in the same direction. So if you start off with that premise and say, okay, everyone's working towards winning and your job is to help them win, it starts to unravel a lot of the complications of culture. So that's first. But regardless of culture, what I found across all cultures, we're all fundamentally human beings with the same desires and needs at the very root base level, right? And I believe it's about helping people prioritize. And I always say, if I had 3 wishes for you, regardless of where you live in this world, and if those 3 wishes were granted, your life would be incrementally better. And the first wish is, I wish you good health. Because without health, you're really no good for anybody else. You're really no good for yourself. So my first wish to everybody in and around me is, I wish you good health. And my job as a leader is to make sure that we're providing and creating environments that are healthy, both mentally and physically for our people and our teams. And that's critical for the employees' success and their well-being and their ability to contribute. So the first, we got to take care of the health of these people, regardless of what country you're working in. The second most thing I wish for you would be that you have meaningful work. And usually when I say this, I get a lot of groans and moans and rolling of the eyes because they say, oh, here comes the CEO. The second thing he wants to talk about after health is meaningful work. But if you really step back and think about it, we spend somewhere between 10 to 15 hours commuting to work, getting back from work, at work, answering calls. In a normal weekday, you're spending about 12 hours at work, which is much more than half your waking hours. If that work doesn't inspire you, if that's not meaningful, your life is pretty dreadful, right? So the second thing I wish for you is a meaningful work. And my job as a CEO, your job as a leader is to ensure that people have meaningful work in front of them, that you're not being bureaucratic or autocratic and just trying to put work on them for the sake of work. What they're doing is truly making a contribution. Right? And the third wish I'd have for you is at the end of the long, weary day when you get home, that you have some loving arms waiting for you, whether it's your family, or your pet, a brother, a sister, a husband, a wife, somebody that you long to be with and you can recharge your batteries with. So the 3 wishes are very simple. And if you think about it, regardless of the culture you live in, these 3 things are fundamental to every single culture. When you couple that with we all want to win and it's a win-win game, it really doesn't become too hard to decode moving across cultures.
Right. Absolutely. Fantastic. I think I've never seen, I've obviously read a couple of books on leadership, but I don't think anybody's really beautifully put it together saying that, hey, these are the 3 things. If I focus on this, maybe this is what will help actually people do better. Right? Health, a great support system, and obviously the work that you do, they should find it meaningful so that there's obviously the outcome is much better than what they can actually drive a better outcome. Right? And do these principles also help you in when you were launching brands, when you were building businesses across the geographies? Were these the principles that helped you, and what else they kind of work in your favor?
Yeah. I think the same thing applies to customers, right? Customers also fall into having the same distinct needs across geographies, right? They want to get great product, they want to get great service, they gonna want to get it at a reasonable price that matches that product and service. These fundamentals do not change wherever you are now. Some market conditions might be more conducive for your product, some may not be. Where they are conducive to you, you've got to make sure that you're absolutely taking advantage and unlocking all the potential that exists for your product in markets where the market is pretty fresh for you, ripe for you. There's a big addressable market that you can go after. There are other markets where it's more challenging. Either you have an incumbent competitor, you have maybe it's not a product that people are familiar with. Maybe it's a product that people don't know they need, right? And that has a different set of challenges too. So fundamentally, when you move across geographies, what you got to try and figure out is what is it that you're trying to get consumers to see you as a unique provider. And if you put yourselves in the consumer's eyes, in their homes, in their daily lives, you're able to decode that much faster than trying to say, no, 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 this is my product. I'm going to push it down to you in a very, very organized, but very, very cookie cutter way. And you really can't do that. I think the best companies in the world localize your product with a global brand, a global underlying message. You look at the classic example is McDonald's. It was built on beef burgers with the Big Mac, and they don't sell it. Not one beef burger in India, yet they're a huge company in India. Why? Because they understood the consumer. They understood that they have to make adaptations. They cannot stick to what they're known for necessarily, right? But other things like pizza obviously translate a lot faster and easier. So it's understanding the consumer first and forwards, working it backwards, and then understanding how you can play to their needs and wants.
And would this also include customer experience?
Customer experience is a broad word, right? So the customer experience starts maybe at the point of contact with your store, with your product, but really the customer journey, the customer experience, if it's on a website, is a totally different experience than if it's at a store. But I think it's important for all companies to realize that your customer experience doesn't really finish till your product is used up and the consumer feels they have value from it, right? So the consumer experience is important, but sometimes I think we focus too much only on the front end of it. When they're going through your website, you're making sure your UI, UX is correct, or when they're going through your stores, you're making sure that they're having a good experience. And that's absolutely the first level, the first step that needs to happen. Otherwise, you don't establish that relationship with the customer. But you also got to think about what is the customer journey like down the road, and how are they going to benefit from our product, and how are they going to make sure that when they used up the product, they feel they got a great deal.
So as the CEO of Metro Brands, right, operating in, of course, the Indian retail market, which has got its own challenges and opportunities, yeah, how do you see this panning out?
I think India, I think, is on the cusp of an amazing growth phase, one that we've not seen in the pace of change in our history. And it's very exciting to be a part of the Indian scene right now as we start the next 10 years. We have a lot of tailwinds going for us. One is the tailwinds of growing incomes, right? So thanks to employment, thanks to superior employment at all levels. I mean, when you look at even somebody like that does a great job of delivering your food with Swiggy or Uber or whoever might be delivering your food, that for them is a big job improvement as well from what they had before. So the job enhancements across the multiple tiers of society, creating tailwinds of income and disposable income are amazing. And then we all know that as incomes rise, so do aspirations. People want better things in their lives. I think we've always heard about the three generations. The first one wanting roti kapra makan only. The second one wanting the quality of life, the bigger house, the bigger cars, and the second one wanting standard of living, which is bigger house, bigger cars, and the third one wanting quality of life. We see that journey starting in India. We see that amazing awareness of wanting aspirational things. So that's a second factor that's going to help us. The third one is the digital connectivity of India is amazing. For a country whose economy and per capita income is where it is, the access to digital connectivity and data is huge and much more democratic than in a lot of other countries. So that also creates a community that can be connected, that understands, that can be spoken to, that can create markets for retailers and other products that want to be out there with them. And last but not least, as we see cities increase their income levels, these cities are going to become more vibrant, right? So we're going to see shifts from organized to unorganized, unorganized to organized retail happening because when cities become vibrant, streets become vibrant and stores start to get like a makeover and or you get new malls coming into it. All of these factors lead to increased consumerism, which hopefully is at a healthy level and not at an unhealthy level. But all these changes we see as tremendous opportunities for any retailer in the Indian landscape. Having said that, this is still India. Every 5 years, we're going to have something thrown at us that throws us for a loop, whether it's GST coming in or demonetization. We're going to have those growing pains from time to time. But if you look at the regression line over a period of 5, 7 years, I mean, I see nothing but huge opportunities for retailers and specifically metro brands in India.
And how do you, obviously, along with this would come certain challenges, certain, so how do you, plan to navigate all of this and drive growth and success?
Yeah, I think it's being constantly aware of what is out there and listening to the people. So one of the things we didn't talk about earlier on when we spoke about leadership, I think one of the biggest parts of leadership is listening. Just not listening to voices or words around you. It's listening for cues. It's listening for behavior cues. It's looking and watching how are the behaviors changing around you, right? And as you look to that, that is a good way for you to be ahead of the curve a little bit because you're going to get those signals a lot sooner than somebody else. Another easy way to cheat really is if you think about it, from what I've been told, in 2032, the GDP, the per capita income, all the other metrics of India are going to be similar to that of China today. So if you want to cheat, you can kind of look at China for at least not necessarily a absolute model of where you could be, but the probability of what India could be if things continue the way they are. So it also gives you an opportunity to say, what does that 10x, what does that 20x look like? And then bring it back and understand how does that play into the timelines of the Indian growth story.
Interesting. Just like the way you kind of put that together. So now the 10X, I think, makes a lot more practical sense when you really look at it and say, hey, can I actually benchmark it against something and work backwards?
Right.
Obviously, today's world is extremely heavily data driven, right? So, very standard question as a leader: how do you use data to make your decisions, right, across and not just maybe specific to any function?
Yeah.
And yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I think data is an amazing thing, right? And it's just kind of right before we went into the AI and ChatGPT burst of stuff happening. Big data was the other big buzzword that happened right after COVID. I think I call it the data continuum, right? And leaders have to understand where in that continuum your organization, your team is. So it all starts out with first how you have to have data. You have to have lots and lots of data, which most companies do have data. But converting the data to information can be quite challenging. You need the analytical tools, you need things that will convert all that data into meaningful reports that really become then information. So converting data to information is critical. And without that, data just becomes a bunch of mumbo jumbo words, right? And words. Once you have that information, then do you have the talent on your team to make that the basis for knowledge and the basis for decisions that they are making? So is your team data driven from a decision standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint? And are they using that information effectively to create knowledge, which then leads to decisions? Consequently, those decisions leads to actions, which is the next step on the data continuum. And those actions, ironically, give you more data. So when you look at the data continuum, it goes from data to information to knowledge as a base for your decisions and decisions. And those decisions leads to actions and results that you take. And those results leads to more data. So to me, it's very critical that we consider how we're using the data, where on the data continuum you as an organization are, and how can you constantly improve the level of each of those segments of the data continuum.
Right. And of course, this is your perspective on how you're using data and data driven insights to drive the brand. So, how does it fit into your leadership approach?
Well, I think making decisions is probably the biggest role of a leader, right? Making decisions, helping people make decisions, helping people understand how to make decisions, is all critical part of leadership. So without data, it's hard for me to pass on my intuitiveness, right? So if you're an intuitive leader, it's going to be extremely hard for you to teach people that intuition. Now, I've seen people with a lot of experience that have an amazing level of intuition towards it. And I'm not telling you that you cannot be intuitive as a leader, but if you really want to create other leaders around you, you've got to help them understand how to decipher data, how to use data as a big tool to help them make decisions so they can be leaders themselves.
Right. As a leader and continuing in the same context of data and decision making, innovation, right, is again a word I think that's being thrown around quite freely, right? So one is your take on innovation. How are you driving innovation within Metro Brands?
Well, I think innovation can be a nebulous and overrated word at times, right? One of the things that I've always been amazed by is the company's distraction, company's distraction with innovation, right? And I'm going to speak to that first, and then I'll speak to innovation. Critical is first and foremost, you're executing and doing the things how to do, and that must be done. And when I look at most organizations, if there's a list of 100 things that can be done, should be done, must be done, you're lucky if you're getting past 70 of them on any given day, right? So my question always becomes, if these are the things right in front of you before you get to the mountain, why are you trying to figure out how to get to the other side of the mountain? Because if you don't cross these, you're not going to get to the other side of the mountain to worry about what happened on the other side of the mountain. That's number one. Number two, innovation, I think, is needed, but you can't innovate for the sake of innovate. That's not how it happens. A lot of times, great innovations are iterations. We'd all love to come out with the iPod or the iPhone because that was truly innovative. No focus group ever said they wanted an iPod, ever, right? I'm going back a few years. No
Right.
focus group ever said they wanted a minivan, but it was organizations that connected what the consumers wanted with what they could do about it. And I think that connectivity still stands true. But so it's critical that you keep looking and saying, where's the consumer going and what's the expectations when they get there? And how can you get them there faster? Right. So taking the cue from the iPod, people were listening to more and more music. They wanted to have music on the go. The Walkman was big. And somebody figured out, what if we gave them a million songs to carry in a very small piece? That to me is innovation, when you figure out what your customers really want and then work towards getting them there faster than they could really have done it themselves. And we have to do that every day, even in our stores, to figure out what is it they want in our stores and how can we get them there faster.
Right. So I think this brings back to the point that you raised a few minutes earlier about listening and how listening plays such an important role in becoming a good leader.
Right. Right.
So last two questions. One is, of course, in this ever changing or ever evolving world of retail, how are you staying ahead of the trends? How are you inspiring teams to embrace this change and make continuous improvement?
Yeah. So I think trends always have cues. It's not like there's no cue ahead of time. So there's always lead indicators and lag indicators to a trend. So, and we if you how to look at the lead indicators of a trend, of a design, of a scheme that's coming up, you're able to capitalize on it more often than not. Having said that, a lot of retail when it comes to product and watching for trends and things like that is half science and half art, right? And anytime you have something that's both of those combinations, it's going to be hard for you to nail it every single time. And as a leader, you got to understand that your team is not going to nail it every single time. You just hope they nail it 4 out of 10 times, right? They miss it three, they nail it four, and the other two, three, they were just pretty much on par, right? So you got to be patient with it and understand that these things aren't easy. And when you combine art with science, that it is gets a little tricky. I also think it's tough. We sometimes seek the opinion of too many people on how we can improve ourselves, right? And my joke is always, if I showed 10 people a Picasso, they would tell me how to improve it. But it's a Picasso, crying out loud. It doesn't need improvement, but everybody feels they need to improve stuff. So as a leader, you need to also figure out, how do we stay relevant with our customers and not get carried away in just walking down. What if we did this? How about doing that? How about doing that? You've got to be very laser focused on what you're trying to do. So those kind of things and getting your teams to think along those lines, it is critical for staying ahead. And I've always said, average strategy well executed beats the crap out of a great strategy that doesn't get executed.
Interesting. Average strategy well executed. Right. So finally, it boils down to execution.
Exactly. That's, I think, is a big, big arrow in our hat arrow in our bow with Metro brands.
Super. And you brought out a word also called relevance, right? Not many people talk about relevance. And this is a word I very seldom hear in conversations. Right? What is this word? Why is this word so critical? The importance of being relevant.
Well, I think so. If I'm going to go back to the marketing funnel, right? There's awareness, then there's relevance, and then there's obviously the last one is an intent to buy, use, whatever the marketer is trying to get you to do, right? And the reality is you can spend a lot of money on the awareness part, but if it doesn't mean anything to me, spending a lot of money telling me about hair color is worthless, right? I'm never, it's not relevant to me. I don't have much hair, right? So to me, it's not, you need to understand what is relevant to a consumer, what is relevant to retail, what is relevant to a consumer experience. Relevance is probably everything. And in fact, the more relevant you are, the more awareness you naturally create, in my opinion. So having said that, I think people sometimes say, oh, no, we need to put ads out there and do a huge marketing spiel to try and tell people about who we are and what we do. That's all good, but you've got to be equally just as focused in telling people how are you relevant. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is there's changing times around us, and there's a lot of fads. There's a lot of good improvements in technology. And what I found is when it comes to technology relevance, people think the store of the future is going to have these screens everywhere, touch screens. You can try stuff on virtual world. And I'm sure some of that's going to evolve into retail. But what I'm finding is fundamentally when a customer comes into a store, the last thing they want to do is touch another screen. So you got to understand the difference between utilizing technology effectively and utilizing it because it's a nice gimmick, right? So that's the other part of relevance. And as a retailer, you got to be relevant. So from a consumer experience standpoint, from a product standpoint, from the overall, what do you mean to the consumer? Are you relevant to them without having to shout it out?
Yeah. So, Samir, I think what you're trying to say is how personal can I get with these consumers?
Correct.
How close can I get with these consumers? So, the once I become personal and personalization kicks in, the relevance obviously then becomes that much more important
Much and easier.
and easier. Right.
Yeah.
And of course, the last question is, as Mr. Nissan Joseph, CEO of Metro Brands, and if I have to ask you to put on the Nostradamus hat, what do you see for the retail industry in the next few years in general? And what do you see as, even as a leader?
So I think the retail world is really there for the taking. I think we can take our cues from economies such as the US and China as to how to build this future retail out. I think we're quite innovative when it comes to a lot of technology utilization. And technology utilization is really more back end oriented when it comes to retail. At the front end, it's just about consumers trying on goods and getting the help to do so. Right. I also think that the in our industry, specific to footwear, the consumer is going to more and more start their journey digitally and then confirm their purchase offline, right? Because the tolerance of fit for footwear is not as much. I think retail as shopping as an entertainment, shopping as an activity is going to be very hard to replace with VR lenses and VR goggles out there, right? People enjoy the social aspect of life. I think another example is would a lot of people would rather sit at a Starbucks and have coffee than sit at home and have coffee. They just want the human connection. Right. Good news is retail is going to change. Retail is going to become much more accelerated. Retail is going to become much more intense, but humans are going to stay humans. And that's what you got to remember as you go forward. So that's my take. Humans are going to stay humans. We're going to love to be loved. We're going to love to touch. We're going to love to hold people. We like to hold things dear. We like the social aspect of life. We like other people around us. We want to feel safe. We want to walk up that Maslow's hierarchy. These are fundamentals that have been around for centuries and are not going to change because we have the internet or the AI or the machine learnings coming into place.
Super. So it finally boils down to fundamentals.
Yes. We call this detail and it's fundamental, right?
Fantastic. I'll take a quick moment to kind of summarize, I think, what you kind of put out there. I think absolute masterclass that I've got to experience. A one-on-one masterclass, which I think I would have. One is, I think, to be a great leader. Now, what does it take? to be a great leader. Firstly, understand what kind of leadership, whether it's structural, strategic, or tactical, and then break it down to saying, hey, have the passion for the product, have passion for people, and have a strong set of beliefs that help you with driving the vision forward. And to make better people, obviously ensure that they are healthy, both in mind and in body, have meaningful work, and at the end of the day, create support system that they can rely on to kind of recharge themselves. The same principle obviously applies to consumers. Great product, great service, great value, but it is a continuous process. Customer experience, which is how do you really, it just doesn't start or stop at just the point of sale. Right? How do you make it a continuous process? How do you ensure you're relevant to them? And in doing so, create a much better experience. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I'm sure the listeners are going to get great value out of this. And I don't know if you have plans, but I think you should write a book on leadership, because this is literally a very practical, what word I use, a very practical way of actually understanding what leadership is.
Thank you, Jiten. Maybe you can help me write the book.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. Love to.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Talk soon. Bye.